Borida. It's just a real pleasure to be here. I want to thank Gary and Sarah and Rachel and others for the opportunity. This is my third trip this will be my second of 3 trips to Ireland this month. So Scottish by family, Welsh by where I live. So it's good to have the Celtic connections, and I'll try not to be too damning about the English today, other than the Westminster government, okay? Okay, so I'm going to say a little bit about who I am and why I've arrived here, but I'm going to try and keep that very, very brief. So these pictures represent some of my journey. I was brought up in a house awash with alcohol, really nice. My dad was a cameraman. He used to love and enjoy sleeping in the beer tent. And from those liberal experiences, I became and moved into what can only be described as a really hedonistic, hippie in the hills lifestyle. And I took absolutely everything and anything that could be put in front of me. And it was a brilliant time. I would never regret it. And it was quite interesting. And when I kind of sobered up or grew up, by which time I'm 30, and I'm trying to escape working in kitchens, which are a drug and fuel existence for anyone that's worked in kitchens, I became a social worker, and I was determined not to do drug and alcohol work. Drug and alcohol work was my life and my friendship and my community. But unfortunately, I couldn't get a job anywhere, and the only person that would employ me was someone who ran their own drug and alcohol agency and got lived experience. So a bit like our previous accidental chief executive, I became an accidental into the drug and alcohol work, and it's never left me. I've been doing it for the best part of 30 years now. I started as a psychotherapeutic, and then I moved into social work, and then I've moved into academia. But more importantly, I wanted to go back. More importantly, I wanted to talk about 3 particular experiences that have led to me being here today. The first of which is Gary's already mentioned, Recovery Voices, and I'll come back to that. I started in the UK recovery movement in the early 2000s, when recovery was a funny word. For the last 12, 13 years, I've been taking people and working with people and going up mountains and doing extreme mountaineering with people. And that's what I really enjoy. That's where my huge passion is. You get some people to the top of a mountain and it just transforms their life. It's a really rich experience for them. So when I first got involved, we really only had what we would call peer involvement. Recovery didn't really exist. And the big sector was advocacy. There was a wee bit in services. And this bit of recovery didn't really exist. 2007, 2008 was a really big push. And I remember being in my first recovery meetings then. And sometimes I sat for many occasions when there were only 1 or 2 people in a room. And it's just brilliant to be so far forward now, and there are a couple of hundred of you in the room, as there are now. So I'm going to just try and tell you what I've learned over those, in the next 15 minutes, what I've learned over those 30-odd years. And I'm really passionate about recovery communities and the fact that they work and why they work. And I'm going to try and say everything that I've learned from those. This point is going too quick for me. I think I need to go back. Can we go back a bit, please? Brilliant, thank you. So, what have I learnt? So I've learnt really that recovery is absolutely what any individual wants, and it's really hard to suggest that it's anything else. But most important for me, I've become to conclude that recovery is this space beyond treatment. You know, I've heard so many times over so many years, people say to me, it's easy to get off, it's hard to stay off. And recovery is about the business of staying off. It's about the business of developing meaningful lives. And it can compose of so many things, as you experience in this particular community, from old school AA and NA, 12 steps, residential, but we can do cooking, eating, and I've seen it manifest itself in so many different forms. And it's about choice. And most importantly, it happens and it works because people are tired of the old. They're tired of the old ways. No one chooses to become the life of an addict, yes? And no one chooses to continue that life. It becomes exhausting. And what happens is that people talk about missing the important stuff in life. And whilst treatment does something, it doesn't give the full journey. So there's lots of things that go on in recovery, and we've already heard once, and it's really interesting, it's my first word on another set of slides. Recovery is about hope, and communities are really, really about hope. And I was talking to Gary last night and saying that one of the differences for me was the difference between maybe what a drug treatment service does. It can often be very transactional. At their worst, they get reduced to piss and test services. At their best, they really help people move on, gain sobriety and stabilize. But recovery services are really what we call transformational. And I've come to understand, and this is probably one of the key learnings for me over a very long time, I've come to understand the idea of commissioning recovery is an oxymoron. And for anyone who's not quite sure what the word oxymoron means, it's when you stick two words together that can't be put together and don't make any sense and can't join them up. So in other words, it's not possible to really commission recovery. Yes? And why is it not possible to really commission recovery? Because commissioning recovery in recovery communities has some of all these really important characteristics. It needs individuals, really special individuals, champions, leaders. And I've come across a number of these over the last 20 or 30 years. And it's not possible for someone in the government to go and find a Gary or buy a Gary before a Gary exists. It just can't happen. A recovery community is made of a set of people that have got some shared passions, some shared beliefs, some shared journeys. And again, you can't just, it's either there or it's not there. So you can foster it and you can nurture it, but you can't buy it off the shelf. The individuals are different. The community that makes it up is different. The families and friends that join in are different, and they're not the same in each different area. So it's not possible. You can put a handbook out and go, this is how we provide a methadone service, and you can make it the same in every single area. For recovery communities, because we have these different things, we can't do it. And then the magic, and I'm going to talk about the magic in a little bit more, the magic is this business that someone who's quite well known in recovery academia, David Best, talks about the contagion, the donut effect. So recovery breeds recovery and it spreads recovery. And you start with 2 people in the room and it becomes 10 people in the room and they become 30 or 50 or 100. And again, you're not commissioning or designing a service where all those people are going to come to the door to start with. They won't come until the bubble comes. So it's very, very interesting. And then, of course, lastly, you can't do it off-the-shelf manual because it's always local. So ARC here started with fitness. It's all about fitness. Where I am and the recovery community I'm involved, it has 3 elements. It has residential, it has a growing and a high street CAF arm, and it has a going up the hill and mountains arms. Well, you can't go up the hills and mountains if you don't live next to the hills and mountains, and so on and so forth. And we can't, in our recovery community, as much as any of us might or might not want to, we can't do ice skating. Yeah? It's 56 miles, 60 miles away. And so you do what's in your community. You do what resources are available to you. So again, it can't come off the shelf. And then there are problems. And some problems set in. And I wanted to do the problems now before I then talk about all the good stuff to finish. And recovery works, and because it doesn't follow a blueprint, and because recovery communities are different, and because they're owned by the communities, and because they don't follow the rules and everything else, we are challenging the orthodoxy all the time. And that becomes uncomfortable. And we have to learn to work with each other and respect each other, because that actually becomes quite threatening. And there's often a desire externally to make recovery groups fit the system rather than change the system to support recovery groups. Even such simple things as forms for funding, they just don't work. And quite typically, a recovery outcome is not the same as a treatment output. One of my favourite recovery outcomes is when someone comes and says to me, do you know what? For the first time in 7 years, Mum and Dad let me come round for Sunday dinner. Show me a form in a drug and treatment agency that has Sunday dinner with your family on it. It doesn't exist. So these become really, really problem. If recovery communities get into accessing money, it becomes like taking what sometimes felt like the king's shilling. And are you giving money to do the work that you know that works for you and that's really good? Or do you just end up taking the money and do the thing that the person who's got the money wants you to do for them? And it becomes a real contradiction. And in many ways, we then kind of try to compare recovery with treatment with harm reduction, and it's like comparing apples and pears, and it's meaningless. These are different parts of a complete jigsaw. In my world, we have what's known as treatment and research hierarchies. So if I want to do a random control trial and get 20 drug users and split them in half and give 10 a drug and don't give 10 a drug and see what happens, I'll get lots of money and I'll get loads of paper published. If I want to get 3 people in recovery and go out on the streets and ask people what matters to them, it's really hard to get that research published. It's even hard to get that research funded. So all of this stuff goes on. And then there's this slight weird contradiction that goes on as well, that there is something about people in recovery that part of some, or for many of them in their journey, in their drug and alcohol world, there's some quite big egos driving factors. There's the ability to want to just do more and more and more. And again, I've seen many a recovery community just have 1 or 2 individuals. They've ended up being put on pedestals by people. And there's only places to fall rather than letting the natural group come round and form and support. And it's very, very difficult for people. And really, I summarise this slide with the purple bubble here, that what we actually need to do is just trust it works. Don't try to change it. We know it works. I don't need to tell you. You're in the room here doing it. You're feeling it. You're feeling the vibe. The vibe this morning was just loud. It was a pre-gig vibe. So it's here. And then there's the magic. What have I learnt from all the groups that works? This is the fairy dust. So if you really were the commissioner and wanted to buy recovery, this is the stuff that you'd have to somehow buy, yes, and sprinkle everywhere. Yes. And it's just not possible to do so. 1 or 2 of the really important bits for me in all of this are, obviously, we've talked about hope already today. I think what I like about recovery communities is it's what I call the no bullshit space. You can't hide, you can't cheat. And in many ways, I really like that. There's an honesty and integrity with people that actually enables people to show some of their vulnerability. It's okay to show that you're not okay. And in other spaces, it's very difficult to show you're not okay. I think what's also important is that recovery communities adapt with things like spontaneity. They're highly active, they're serendipitous. And of course, we don't even occupy the same space necessarily in the new electronic world. So recovery groups like to operate in Facebook arenas and WhatsApp arenas, and these might be the last arenas that you're allowed to operate in professional organisations because someone's decided that that's not healthy for their computer system or something. So we can't even communicate or talk with each other at times. But this is some of the magic that makes it work. I've come across many, many, many examples, and I really would like to have this slide somehow shared with people. Please photograph it, look at the links. And I want to give you a flavour of some of the stuff that you can find out there. So there's an organisation called Eternal Media. That's a recovery group that exclusively works through film. Yeah? And they actually just get people and they teach them to be filmmakers and they tell stories of recovery through filmmaking. Some of you may have heard of Fallen Angels. This is exclusively a recovery community that's based around dancing. And they teach people in recovery how to dance and they put on performances in national theatres and stuff like that. Forth Valley Recovery Community from Scotland is what I call a peripatetic community. It's so geographically diverse, its recovery community operates in a different location for 7 days of the week. So each of these models are completely different. North Wales Recovery Community I come from is one of the few residential recovery communities. We've actually got 18 people living together in a house together. And that house is open to the public from 7 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night for walk-in recovery support. And out the back of that residential unit, we've got some allotments and people grow stuff. And then we've got a cafe down the high street. And then there's an example, say, of Recovery Cymru in South Wales, who are now integrated part of the overall commissioned treatment system. And then you can see a new recovery community, one I'm working with at the moment very closely that have only just been going for a year and a bit. And they have this very interesting model of actually being 6 or 7 different recovery communities who all meet together for some stuff and do loads of separate stuff. They've got 1 or 2 monthly meetings where they all come together, but the rest of it's stuff. And because it's Sheffield and Rotherham area, lo and behold, for anyone who knows anything about snooker, home of the Crucible, it's the only recovery community I've come across that's got a snooker group. Because it comes from their community. It makes sense. And as Gary said, and it was a real privilege to interview Gary and capture it, with my very good friend David, we're trying to capture the stories of recovery community through Recovery Voices, so they're there for you to have a look. Okay, so coming back to my original slide, where do I think we're at now? Well, I actually think where we're at now is that this recovery communities have a role in the whole of the jigsaw. I've come to conclude that all of the bits are really important. If we don't keep people alive, they can't recover. And if you need to recover once you've been able to kept alive and you've got the opportunity, you need to be able to destabilised and sober. But we do need to get around the problem at the moment that our treatment systems spend 90% of the money on the green circle. Yes? And we need to readdress the balance and sort it out. For recovery communities themselves, well, our biggest role undoubtedly is in the meaningful life stuff after people have stayed sober and started to begun to make change. But we can have a role, we can deliver smart recovery and other stuff within the treatment setting. And then we can be supporters of stuff that's actually peer-led interventions. And I know in some places, for example, in some communities, the only naloxone that's given out in those communities is a peer-to-peer naloxone program that comes from a recovery community. So it's not either or, and there are lots of different places for people to roll. And they can look very, very differently. They can look from informal groups. They can be arms of huge, big third sector organisations. They can be local organisations, charities, social enterprises just here like Art Fitness. They can actually be a coalition of a number of small groups of recovery communities. They can be funded. They can be unfunded. The Mountaineering Recovery Group that I got involved with for 13 years never took any money from anyone. Yes? And we walked 250 mountaineering expeditions we did. They can be in buildings, they can be online, all sorts of stuff. So I've learned it's actually really, really complex, but I've also learned, and this is where I want to finish, that it's actually really simple. Yeah? So recovery communities is people who have been through shit. Yeah, there's no other way of describing it. Whatever else you want to do, but let's just call a spade, yes? And it's their mates, their families, their friends, their communities. They come together. That's what a recovery community is. And in the coming together, it's about supporting each other. It's not about the you, it's about the we. It's about the us. And what stands out recovery communities is that it's about doing stuff. Lots of stuff. The more stuff, the better. The more and more stuff we can do, the more and more better and energized an activity we feel. And more importantly, that's both sharing with each other, but that's giving back to the communities that we're in. Yeah? We've taken a lot from the communities and we want to give back. And it's about making change and making a difference. And most importantly, I think what recovery communities do in many ways in which the rest of the official system doesn't do is it's about making a better world for all of us. And I have a wee postscript underneath, and it's important, that postscript, but it's just a postscript. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you've got something from whatever I've got. It's very hard putting 40 years of your life into 20 minutes and 12 slides. But thank you for listening and thank you for being attentive.